How good will the new Voiceless voice deck be for the TCG? Let's talk about them and see how viable they will be in the future. Now, before we get into this video, we're going to be going over each and every card in the deck, going over deck build, showing some combos, and a retrospect overview of the whole entire deck at the end. So get your popcorn and a drink. This video is going to be quite long. Now, before we get into this video, I'd like to thank Respect Yu-Gi-Oh! For a lot of the help with this video, because he was the main one that I went to actually ask a lot of questions, so to see how the deck would work, plus on top of a few Q&As that I had that I asked him for a little advice later on. But for right now, we're going to be going through the Phantom Nightmare initial wave. Then we have Legacy of Destruction support, the deck building portion of the video, the main combo lines and play lines that you can do, the Q&A I did with respect to Yu-Gi-Oh! And after that, we're going to do a roundup. So let's get into the video and let's talk about Voiceless Voice. So first off, we're going to be going over the new cards of the Voiceless Voice archetype from Phantom Nightmare. The first card that we're going to be taking a look at is Lo, the Prayers of the Voiceless Voice. She is a level 1 fairy effect monster with 50 attack and 20/50 defense. This card's the main part of the deck, being a 3 of, as she can offer herself as a full tribute for one light warrior or dragon ritual monster. And when she is normal or special summoned, you could place one Voiceless Voice continuous spell or trap card from your deck to your field. On top of all of this, if a light dragon or warrior ritual monster is special summoned to your field while this is in your graveyard, you could special summon her for free, allowing you to get another continuous spell trap card from your deck when she's summoned on your opponent's turn for added protection or disruption. Next up, let's talk about the continuous spells and trap cards you can activate off of Lo. The first one up, we have Barrier of the Voiceless Voice. This is a super strong card, allowing you to make it where your opponent cannot target ritual monsters you control for attacks if you control Lo and a light ritual monster. Also, they cannot target light ritual monsters you control with effects, so realistically nullifying cards like Infinite Impermanence and Effect Veiler. During the main phase, you can add one Voiceless Voice card or Skull Guardian ritual monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of this card. Overall, this is another 3 of in the deck with how powerful it is, while protecting your cards and being able to grab any Voiceless Voice card you need. Afterwards, we have Radiance of the Voiceless Voice. This is a unique card for the deck, as you can activate one of 2 effects, being to shuffle one light warrior or dragon ritual monster, or one ritual spell from your hand or graveyard into the deck, and take one Voiceless Voice monster and either add it to your hand or special summon it. This card works super well with Lo, so you can get a Barrier of the Voiceless Voice instantly upon her summon during the opponent's turn. The other effect allows you to target cards your opponent controls up to the amount of light, dragon, or warrior ritual monsters you control to destroy them and itself, because Radiance does that, being a good way to disrupt your opponent at a given time when needed. With how this card is, it's mainly a 1-of for the deck, but sometimes you could play 2 depending on the meta and the situations you are in. You have to be really careful when playing this card as well, because of the use that it has, since we have no way to recover it as of this moment. And now let's get into the main aspect of the deck, the 3 mega retrains of the giant ritual monsters. These retrains consist of Saravis, Dragon Sage of the Voiceless Voice, Saphira, Dragon Queen of the Voiceless Voice, and Skull Guardian, Protector of the Voiceless Voice. These 3 cards are the main brutes of the deck that gives you extra consistency and interruptions to your opponent, while they're also allowing you to OTK as fast as you can if you stop your opponent in their tracks. Of these 3, let's first go over the beauty of the deck, being Saphira. This single card can send any ritual spell from your deck to your graveyard, then add one light warrior or dragon monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Her second ability is being able to banish yourself from the graveyard to ritual summon one light warrior dragon ritual monster from your hand by attributing monsters from your hand or field whose total level equals that level of the ritual monster. Mainly, the ritual monster you want to summon are Skull Guardian, Protector of the Voiceless Voice, or Saravis the Ancient and Ascendant. This card is another 3-up for the deck. It's one of the main consistency and power cards of the deck, being able to get you your ritual spell in the graveyard for uses later in the turn. Also, this card can get around Drone Lockbird because the add from deck is an optional add, so you can realistically just Foolish Burial this, use the effect to ritual summon into Skull Guardian to summon low to get into one of your continuous spells or traps. Now the next one is interesting for Saravis, as it's a one of, but it's still powerful. Saravis, Dragon Sage of the Voiceless Voice, being able to shuffle 2 spells from your graveyard or your hand, including 1 ritual spell to summon it from your hand. The other thing that he does is when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can special summon 1 light warrior or dragon ritual from your hand or deck, but it is returned to the hand during the end of the turn. But that's the least of the worries, because you're most likely summoning his ritual counterpart from another form of interaction. The main one you want to special summon is Voiceless Voice Protector, to also proc the effect of low in the graveyard to special summon her. This card is a one of because of the recyclability that he has for your spell cards, so you can put things like Pre-Preparation or Right Back, or maybe something like a Super Polymerization, or maybe a one-of that you want back in your deck for later. So he's alright, but he is still one of the weaker cards of the deck. Finally, for the retrains, we're going to be going over Skull Guardian, the Voiceless Voice Protector, as this card can be summoned with Prayer of the Voiceless Voice. But you can summon it off of a card like Saravis instead if you need for a faster OTK. As this card gains 20-50 attack while you have low on your field or in your graveyard, forcing a strong push if your opponent doesn't have anything to stop it. This is one of your main forces of the deck, being a 2-of, as it could be a tad bricky, but that's not really stopping anyone. One of the best things about this card is when it's ritual summoned, you can add 1 Voiceless Voice monster or a Warrior Dragon ritual monster from your deck to your hand, which will be useful throughout the main combo. The upside of having low on your field while your opponent activates a card or effect, you can negate and destroy that card for another form of interruption, which is very powerful at the end of the day because of how useful it could be, being able to negate a certain card effect that you kind of want to not go off. So finally, we're going to be covering Prayer of the Voiceless Voice, the ritual spell for this deck. This card can be used to ritual summon any light ritual monster, but you must tribute light monsters from your hand or field whose total level equal or exceeds the level of the ritual monster you want to summon, but if you have low, that really does not matter because she's the full tribute. The best thing about this card is that it can summon a light ritual monster from your deck if your light ritual monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect by banishing this card from your graveyard. The cards that you can summon off of this effect are Saravis the Ancient and Ascendant, Saphira, Queen of Dragons, Skull Guardian, the Voiceless Voice Protector, or even Odd Eye's Pendulum Graph Dragon from your hand or deck, ignoring the summoning conditions so you can get another form of interruption if you lost a card due to your opponent. Experts in the deck will always keep one in graveyard and not be greedy by summoning, because sometimes you need that ritual spell in your graveyard in certain key points where you have to keep it and wait to activate it later on. Before we get into the combo of the video, on top of the Legacy of Destruction support, let's talk about the main staples of the deck that you can play to make it casually viable or competitively viable. First of which being Pre-Preparation or Right. This is one of the main ritual searchers for the deck since it grabs Prayers of the Voiceless Voice and any of the ritual monsters listed on it, either Saravis or Voiceless Voice Protector. Another consistency card we have is Diviner of the Herald, since it can send any fairy from the deck or extra deck to the graveyard and increase its level to fulfill the tribute cost for any of your ritual summons. Some cards to send are Tyrus Hierarchia, Elder Entity Natis, or Herald of the Arclight. Another positive effect of this card is when it's tributed, you can special summon a level 2 or lower fairy monster from your hand or deck, so it's another option to get low out as fast as possible. For the ritual aspect that you might want to run are Saravis the Ancient and Ascendant, and Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon. We'll talk about Cerebus first because it's quicker for me, as this card protects your monsters from being targeted by discarding it, and when your opponent special summons a monster while this is on the field, you can return it to your hand, negate the special summon, and banish that monster, which can be detrimental for your opponents during their main line of play for a 1 to 2 of in the deck. Now we can finally talk about Pendulum Graph Dragon. This is the oddball of the light dragon targets. Now, this is one of the more interesting cards that we've seen OCG tech into their decks, because when this card is scaled during the end phase, you can return it to the hand and add 1 ritual spell from your deck or graveyard. So it recycles your ritual spells when needed, but it's not really that good because it's better to try and get it to scale during your opponent's turn so that you can have a ritual spell during your actual turn. One of the less useful effects outside of going into time is if your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, inflict 300 damage to them. The most effective effect of the two is when your opponent activates a spell card or effect. Quick effect, place this card in the pendulum zone, and if you do, negate that effect. Then, if you place this ritual summoned card in the pendulum zone, you can special summon 1 Odd Eyes monster from your extra deck. The main ones you want to summon is Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon, so you can, on your turn, summon Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon Overload to go for a full-on OTK, as Overload can attack up to 3 times during each battle phase when it's summoned using a rank 7 as a material. The other card you could summon off of this would be Odd Eyes Wing Dragon. This card is useful as it can target 1 effect monster your opponent controls to negate the effect until the end of this turn, or during the battle phase you can destroy all level 5 or higher monsters your opponent controls for free board wipe 2 or TK. So the Odd Eyes extra deck monsters are super useful depending on how the game is going. Finally, the last cards you want to run is either 1 or 2 of Dynamundo. This Link monster can be summoned with 2 monsters, including a ritual monster, so it's super easy to make with Link Kariba or Relinquished Anima after attaching an opponent's monster. When this card is special summoned, you can target a card on the field and a ritual monster in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck for some form of targeting removal. The most important thing about this card is during your opponent's turn, you can tribute this card to target a ritual monster in your graveyard, special summon it, or add it to your hand. So if you use a Cerebus for targeting protection, you can special summon it for a quick special summon negate and banish, just to have a second targeting protection, or you can revive Voiceless Voice Protector, so you have a negate for little to no cost to revive Lo with her own effect, so you can make Barrier live to protect your monsters. Now, since we're heading into the Phantom Nightmare format, I won't be talking about text for post-Legacy of Destruction, as I will have a separate video for that later on. Now, we're going to be talking about some other cards that you would want to use for this deck, because they're super useful. They are things like Pot of Extravagance, since it's just a free draw 2, since you don't use the extra deck that much. Triple Tactics Talent, as it can either take a monster to break boards, draw 2 cards, or rip a card out of your opponent's hand, going first if they draw or ash you. Next up is Super Polymerization. It is really useful in the deck since it allows you to break boards faster and get an extra copy of Lo from your hand to the graveyard easily. So when you special summon a ritual monster, you can special summon it for free. These are all 3-ofs in the deck, mainly because of how powerful they are, but you can skate by with 2 talents. With the hand traps of Nibiru, Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, Infinite Impermanence, and probably Ghost Spell, all hand traps are going to be super useful going into Phantom Nightmare format. With how much space this deck has, it's surprising how much you could fit in with hand traps and staple-wise, because the deck really doesn't cross a boundary, and I like to call it has a negative amount of space where you can fit so many generic and staple cards. But let's head into the side deck real quick. One of the most powerful cards in the side deck, because it shares the same suite as it does with Diviner, is Ultimate Slayer. It's a super powerful card because of what you already run, being Elder Entity Natis. You also have Garua, the Wings of Resonant Life, and even Herald the Arclight, because they share the same cards with Diviner the Herald. On the other aspect to the side is Summon Limit. You can also main it, because it's one of the most powerful floodgates that didn't get affected by the recent January Forbidden Limited list. And most decks need to summon more than twice, and that's what the new format we're going to be heading into, as it could slow down your opponent. And for some of the effects that you can run are things like Cosmic Cyclone, Lightning Storm, or Harpy's Feather Duster. Once we're finally done with these cards, let's finally now talk about the weaknesses and choke points of the deck. This deck is somewhat susceptible to super polymerization, but if you have Voiceless Prayer in the graveyard, you'll be able to summon back Voiceless Voice Protector, and since you summon a Light Dragon Ritual monster, you'll be able to revive Lo, making herself activating a barrier or authority from your deck. While this is fine, Lo sadly also has choke points since she is the main card of the deck, and honestly, it's really, really harsh because she is susceptible to things like Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence if you don't have Seravis the Ancient Ascendant in hand. Other than that, it shares main weaknesses as any light and dark deck does because of Bestials, but that shouldn't be an issue because the current state of the meta we are heading into being a fire dominant format, unless if I'm wrong, it is going to be very interesting for that. But players might go to cards like DD Crow to stop stuff on their turn from being able to summon Lo, which is the main reason why Artifact Lancia is played along with Evenly Matched being a super relevant side deck card to use Lancia against. Infinite Impermanence and Effect Veiler have lesser impacts because of Seravis and Barrier of the Voiceless Voice, protecting from targeting negations through your combo. And as always, Drawn Lockbird is one of the hand traps that the deck is super susceptible to since it turns off searching, but you will most likely get trolled after using pre-preparation right or ashed prior to it. Now before we get into the combos, let's talk about the Legacy's Destruction support that's coming in April as we get additional support for this deck, being a new ritual monster and an additional continuous spell. Both of these cards are Blessing of the Voiceless Voice and Saphira the Voiceless Voice, Deity of Dragons, name pending because we don't know the name yet. These cards are okay since Saphira is mainly a retrain of her original counterpart, but in many ways. If she's ritual summoned and if you have Lo on your field or in your graveyard, you could draw 2 and discard 1 to fix your hands. Her second effect allows her to discard 1 random card from your opponent's hand when an attack is declared involving a light dragon or light warrior ritual monster. And finally, during the end phase, you can add 1 light monster from your graveyard to your hand to recycle important hand traps or cards like Diviner the Herald, Effect Veiler, Saphira the Wise, or even Seravis. Since she is one of the more impactful cards of the support, she will be an instant inclusion into the deck as she is a one-of. So for the final card, I'm going to be going with a probably prediction of the name because over in the OCG, the name is Voiceless Voice Blessings, but in the TCG, it's probably going to be Blessings of the Voiceless Voice. Now this card can target a Voiceless Voice card that is banished in your graveyard to add it to your hand, so it could freely recycle cards like Authority, Prayer, or even Lo if needed. Outside of that, if a non-ritual monster is normal or special summoned, you could ritual summon 1 light warrior or dragon monster from your hand by tributing monsters that equal or exceed the level of the monsters you want to summon, along with giving the card battle immunity while it's face up on the field. This is also another impactful card that gives the deck another way to summon the ritual monsters on the opponent's turn for interruptions and another instant inclusion of the deck as a one-of. With these 2 cards, it helps the deck enough to make it easier to recover cards and make plays on the opponent's turn to interrupt them at key points. Overall, these 2 cards are super solid, and I'm extremely hyped for them to finally come to the TCG, which they're going to be in Legacy of Destruction that releases April 26th. Now, since we're all done covering all the cards, let's talk about the ratios to run for this deck, as it's quite interesting how much negative space there is. Now, negative space is space within a deck of the main archetype that it leaves. In the main deck, you want 2 Voiceless Voice Protector, 1 Seravis the Ancient and Ascendant, 1 Seravis Dragon Sage of the Voiceless Voice, 3 Saphira Queen of the Voiceless Voice, 3 Lo the Prayer of the Voiceless Voice, 3 Barrier of the Voiceless Voice, 2 Prayers of the Voiceless Voice, the ritual spell, and 1 Radiance of the Voiceless Voice. That is the main bulk of what is needed, and it only makes up 16 total cards in the deck, leaving you room for 23 other cards to help with consistency, hand traps, and staples. For the cards that you want to max out copies for, those would be Diviner the Herald, Pot of Extravagance, Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, or Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, Drawn Lockbird, and Infinite Impermanence. Other cards that you can play at 2 or 3 would be Pre-Preparation Rite, and the one-ofs being Trice Hierarchia, Called by the Grave, and Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph. With all these cards mentioned, that leaves us with 37 cards, so you can run other tech choices like Super Polymerization and Summon Limit. With how much negative space this deck, it is unbelievable, but you may be asking, what about the 2 cards from Legacy of Destruction? Well, the answer is that both of them are a one-of, and as you opt to run one Serapis the Ancient Ascendant, you'll have enough room for 1 copy of each, and 3 of a final card like Super Polymerization and Summon Limit, like mentioned before. So, the hand trap lineup that you want to run works the best, being able to run anywhere from 9 to 17 hand traps, which is shocking for some, but useful because of how much room there is. But outside of that, let's look at the extra deck really quick. The extra deck kind of doesn't matter to a point because of how many cards you really don't use. It's still great to have for utility like Link Kribo and Relinquished Anima for the one of Link ones, and it also helps out when summoning out SP Little Knight to banish something when she's summoned, along with Dynamana for another powerful Link 2. For the Xyzs, you have many options like Super Star Slayer, Typhoon, Sky Crisis as a main one-of, unless if you want to run 2. For the Ultimate Slayer, Diviner the Herald targets, you want to run a mix of Elder Entity Natis, Herald of the Arclight, and Grura, Wings of Resonant Life. For the Fusion and Synchro targets as well, as the other links you want to run are either Guilty Gearfried, the Magical Steel Knight, Predaplant, Dracostapelia, or Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, as there's many options for Super Polymerization. Other final utility cards you can run are things like Lina the Light Charmer Lustrous, or Dark the Dark Charmer Umbral, and Chaos Angel, depending on what you need, since you don't really need a tuner for Chaos Angel as your cards are already light, but sometimes a Voiceless Voice Protector plus Ash gets you there, or even tries Hierarchia and Effect Veiler to make it. Some of the extract monsters can be ran in multiples like Dynamundo, Garura, Entes, or Arclight, and while others like Typhoon and SP should be, but with the current prices, they will be hard to get a little. So after all of that, this is what the final deck should look like here in the TCG, and you can see how much space was taken up just from staples alone. Disclaimer though, the other engine that could be played if you don't want to run Pot of Extravagance is a small Dogmatica engine with 3 Nadir Servant and 1 Dogmatica Maximus. This follows with a running of a Shaddoll engine in the extra deck with Shaddoll Schism in the main for Shaddoll Winda. Additional targets you can run are Cypherame Lord Omega for easy recycling, Fossil Machine Skullwagon for spell and trap card destruction, and Tri-Brigade Arms Bluecephalus II for an additional send from the extra deck. This engine is the best for going second with how many you can send from the extra deck to gain advantage. The other option is also running both Extravagance and Nadir Servant, but the two can conflict at times because you're banishing your targets off of Extravagance. Post Legacy of Destruction, this deck does change a little as cutting Pot of Extravagance happens to add the new additions of Saphira, the Voiceless Voice Deity of Dragons, and Blessing of the Voiceless Voice. With Saphira allowing you to draw 2 cards at any time is better than Pot of Extravagance at the start of your turn, and you can utilize a second copy of Serapis, the Ancient Ascendant here for a little more targeting protection. Overall, with these new cards in it, it changes the deck a little, but to the point where you can use the extra deck more for utility than before. For the combo lines and plays and other things that the deck has, I love to highlight a few of them here, but first let's go through all the main combos uninterrupted. We have the main combos, which will go over Low, it's by herself, Low plus Pre-Preparation, Diviner and Pre-Preparation. So let's take a look at those and see what these do. Now we're over on the OBS side of things to go over some of the combos, and this is the combo with No or Low, Prayers of the Voiceless Voice. So first off, we're going to be normal summoning out Low, using her effect to place your barrier from the deck. Then we're going to use Barrier to search out Saphira, and after that we're going to activate the effect of Saphira. Saphira is going to pitch herself, sending the ritual spell from our deck to the grave, adding Skull Guardian, the Voiceless Voice Protector. After that, we're going to declare the effect of Saphira in graveyard, banishing herself, attributing low to special summon out Skull Guardian. We're going to go chain link or effect of low to special summon her out. And you can also use the effect of Skull Guardian to search out any of your silent or voiceless voice monsters or a warrior or dragon ritual monster from your deck to your hand. After that, the other combo of only low, because there's a little more addition, it's going to be the exact same things. Activating barrier from deck, grabbing Saphira, using Saphira, sending herself, gets the ritual spell into the grave, and Saravis in hand. Then we're going to banish the Saphira to tribute off low to summon Saravis, and then low is going to special summon herself back. So now you have a bounce negate of a summon to banish and a targeting protection when it goes back to your hand, which honestly can really come in handy. After that, we're going to be taking a look at pre-preparation of right plus low from the deck, and realistically, this is a very, very strong combo because we're going to activate pre-preparation right. This allows us to get Silent Forcing or Prayer of the Voiceless Voice and Skull Guardian. After that, we're going to activate the effect of our prayer, tributing off low to summon out Skull Guardian, chainlink 1 Skull Guardian, chainlink 2 our low, summoning low, and we're going to grab a search of Saravis or whatever you want. And that was an accidental mill on my behalf. Then we're going to trigger low on a new chain, activating barrier and using barrier to grab authority, or what is now called it is actually now called, oh boy, this is a mess already, Radiance. So there is that. And then we get to set the Radiance, and now we have a destruction, a omni negate, protection, and targeting protection. After that, we're going to have a second combo to go off of, and this is the exact same starting, being pre-preparation right and Novox or low. So pre-prep is always going to grab the two cards, Skull Guardian and Prayer. We're going to go Prayer, tributing low, chain 1, chain 2, summon low, grab Pendulum Graph Dragon, trigger low, and then we're going to grab another copy of Prayer. So we're going to fast forward again, activate Prayer, summon out our Odd Eyes for a spell negate, and then we also have the Omni negate. So that is definitely very, very useful. But since we don't have low, it's not an Omni negate, but we can get it if they super poly us. And then finally, we're going to be taking a look at the last combo line of preparation light of right and low. Now, in my opinion, this has many different iterations you can do, and it's always the same start. After that, we normal summon out low, activating the barrier, grabbing Saphira. We're going to go effective Saphira, tribute herself, or send herself, sending the prayer, and grabbing the Saravis. We're going to activate the effect of Saphira, summoning out low, chain 1 Skull Guardian, chain 2 low, and then we're going to go our prayer, tribute low, summon this, use the effect of Saravis, putting back the ritual spell and preparation of right to summon it. So now we can just go effect, quick effect to return this card to the hand to special summon a light warrior or dragon ritual monster from your deck, ignoring summoning condition. So we're going to be summoning out Pendulum Graph Dragon, and that allows us to summon low back from the grave. Now let's take a look at the combos with just Diviner, as we have two of them lined up. Then we have two with Diviner and Trias Hierarchia, and then two with Diviner and Pre-Preparation of Rites. So first off, we're going to be normal summoning out Diviner, triggering the effect setting your Tiras Hierarchia, and then we're going to use the effect of Tiras to tribute off the Diviner to summon her out. We're going to trigger the effect of Diviner and use its effect to summon out low, and we're going to activate the effect of low to activate Barrier. Now Barrier is going to grab us the copy of Saphira the Wise, or the new Saphira, and then we're going to use her effect to tribute her off, sending the ritual spell from the grave to activate and grab Skull Guardian. We're going to use the effect of Saphira Engrave, tributing off our low, summoning out Skull Guardian so we can go chain 1 Skull Guardian, chain 2 Novox, so they cannot Ash Blossom you here. Summon back the Novox, and then we're going to grab this Cerevis. Now you could also tribute the Trias, so you have a Skull Guardian plus low instead, but this could also come up a little more. Now then, for the next Diviner combo, we're going to normal summon out Diviner. It's the same startup. Summon out the Trias, tributing the Diviner. Diviner summons out Novox. Novox grabs Barrier. Activate Barrier from the deck. He grabs Saphira, and then Saphira is going to do the same thing, grabbing Cerevis instead. Then we're going to use the effect of Saphira, tributing her off, tributing the Hierarchia. So now we have a bounce, and literally that is all for that, which is a little weaker than normal. Now then, we have 2 combos that kind of get around Imperm and Veilers. So first off, we're going to be normal summoning out Diviner, triggering its effect, chaining to Cheerus Hierarchia. So if they chain like an Imperm, then we could just go activate, tribute off the Diviner, summon that out, and we're going to be sending Herald of the Arclight from the extra deck to the grave. And then we're going to go chain 1 Diviner, chain 2 Herald, and this is where we're going to summon or search out a Cerevis and summon out low. So now we have a protection to another targeting effect. After that, we're going to go effect of our Cerevis, grabbing Barrier and use Barrier's effect to grab Saphira, use the effect of Saphira so we can pitch it and get the Ritual Spell Engrave and grabbing Skull Guardian. Realistically super powerful. After that, we're going to activate the effect of Saphira, tributing our copy of Hierarchia to summon out Guardian, and then Guardian's going to trigger her effect, or its effect, to grab our Continuous Trap card to set it to the field. So now we have a Omni Negate, a Destruction, and a Targeting Prevention, which is realistically super powerful. And now finally, for the last combo of Diviner plus Hierarchia, we're just going to fast forward and just do this whole entire thing again. Sending the 2 cards, we get to grab Prayer, summoning low, low places Barrier, Barrier gets Saphira. Saphira triggers to send a copy of Prayer to grab Skull Guardian, and we're going to use her effect, tributing the Hierarchia, so we can summon out the Skull Guardian, use Prayer, tribute low, summon out Odd Eyes, and summon back Novox. So this is a Spell Negate, an Omni Negate, and attack. They cannot attack your ritual monsters. Also, your opponent cannot target light monsters you control with card effects. So, instantly, very, very powerful. So now, finally, we're going to be taking a look at pre-preparation rate for and Diviner. So we have 2 combos to go off of, and let's see what this deck does. First off, we're going to go pre-preparation rate because this is going to be our Astral check and grabbing Prayer and our Skull Guardian. After that, since we have these in hand, we're going to summon out Diviner and use the effect to send Trias Hierarchia. Then we're going to trigger its effect to tribute the Diviner to summon out Hierarchia to trigger Diviner, and this allows us to summon Low, and Low is going to trigger grabbing Barrier to the field. Barrier is going to trigger grabbing Saphira, which is one of your best plays in the deck, as you can tell from all the combos. And then we're going to use the effect of Saphira, tributing or sending herself and a ritual spell to grab Pendulum Graph Dragon. After that, we're going to trigger the effect of Saphira to banish herself, tributing the Low, summoning out Skull Guardian, chain 1, chain 2, Low. Now this summons out Low, and then Skull Guardian is going to search Cerevis the Sagely Silence Dragon, which is the old name, and then we're going to go activate Prayer, tributing Hierarchia, summoning out Odd Eyes, and then we're going to use the effect of Cerevis. Since we have 3 spell cards engraved, we're going to be putting back a Prayer and our pre-preparation right to summon himself out. So this board is a Spell Negate, a Omni Negate. You cannot target my light monsters with card effects, and also you could summon out Cerevis from deck for a special summon negate. So that's really powerful right there, off of just 2 cards. And now finally we're going to be looking over the last combo, and it's going to be essentially the same for quite some time. So let's do fast forward. Pre-prep grabs our 2 cards, but this time we're going to be grabbing Saravis instead because this card does mention Saravis. So now we have targeting prevention for this whole combo. We're going to go normal diviner, use the effect to send Hierarchia, use Hierarchia to tribute Herald, Herald summon low places Barry grabs Saphira. Saphira is going to use her effect to send the ritual spell to add Skull Guardian, and we're going to activate Saphira, tributing low, summon Skull Guardian, go chain 1, chain 2, summon out the low, and we get a search of our Radiance. Then we're going to activate Prayer, and this is where we're going to tribute off the Hierarchia to summon out Saravis. So now, realistically, we have a pop 2, negate of a special summon and targeting negation on top of a Skull Guardian negate. So that is 3 different forms of interruption just off of 2 cards. So that is really, really useful. Now, since we're done with the initial breakdown of the combos, let's get into the Q&A that I did with Arcanite from Respect Yu-Gi-Oh! It was nice getting a lot of insight from him and all the help I could with these questions, and I'll also link a Q&A he did from his blog post in the pinned comments down below. And let's talk about some of these questions. So the first question I asked him was, how does the deck play around Droll and Lockbird? He responded with, when playing this deck, you have to be mindful that the basic lines are all Droll prone. Depending on your hand, you could play around it. Let's say your hand is pre-preparation of right and low. Which path will you choose to still lead onto something that can be disrupted? If you answer low, you are prone to imperm and Droll and ending on nothing. If you start with pre-preparation, you can bait Ash Blossom, and if Droll is a threat for real, you could search Prayer and Skull via it, and if they Droll you, you can ritual summon Skull Guardian using low in hand. While you can no longer search, remember you could still complete Skull plus low as low revives herself. Then low can place either authority for extra disruption or barrier for anti-targeting. And if they use both Droll and Lockbird and Imperm, they are down to 3 cards since they used a hand trap. Then Skull Guardian is already an Omni Negate by the time low is revived, so it's safe to place something. The second question I asked, is it better to run Pot of Extravagance or the Nadir Servant package? He responded with, you can run a build that has both Extravagance and Nadir, but no Diviner. The OP's reason was that it's more flexible against Maxine going second. His issue with Nadir Servant is that it's almost useless against the mirror match because the best you could do is dump Garura, and if they Droll you, you could die along with Nadir conflicts with Extravagance. Since if you resolve Extravagance, you may banish possible Nadir targets, and if you resolve Extravagance, you can dump Garura off of Nadir Servant, but you won't get the draw. So overall, he's saying that he really likes the Extravagant side better because it's a free draw too, over having something that conflicts over the whole entire part where you banish your targets, and also it's not that good in the mirror match because he plays quite a bit in with the mirror match. The third question I asked was, what cards do you normally see to try to bait Ash and Droll? Extravagance for me is a Ash Droll check. If they Ash it, then the rest of your one-of combos are free most of the time. Now, this was a question that was brought up to me from one of my friends. Why run Pot of Extravagance over Pot of Desires? Now, Arcanite responded with, it could work, although Pot of Desires was never considered in usual Voiceless Voice builds due to how fragile the deck is. You could probably banish all your ritual spells in your deck off of Desires due to the +2, but realistically I could see some trying Desires, doing the whole combo, then using Desires at the end of the turn. But in my opinion, I do agree with Arc here because of you're wasting resources that you could be using instead throughout the whole entire game for the grind game. Now for the second to last question is, how is the Fire King matchup and what are some of the ways to push through and beat them? Now, he responded with, that deck is tough to beat without the right hand traps. Maxi, for us in the OCG, normally tames them, and Nibiru halts their combo to the point where they couldn't even bounce back with the usual lines. Imperm or the Snake Eye Ash going first uses Anti-Spell Fragrance or Summon Limit to halt some of their combos. Be mindful that the opponent may also have prepared a side for your sides, like Artifact Lancia and Imperial Iron Wall against Soul Release or Cosmic Cyclone against your Floodgates. Now, I always had to ask questions to a lot of people, and the final question was, for the final question, would you consider or recommend Dimension Shifter in the deck? And Ark responded with, if going against Fire Kings, there are other options that wouldn't conflict with the deck, like Fantastical Dragon Phantasme, Nibiru the Primal Being, or Drone Lockbird, etc. The main reason why is because you want all your cards in the graveyard so you can recycle them or even utilize them to fuller extent. And even if you're under D-Shifter and you get super polyed, that definitely hurts the deck quite a bit because you're losing out on one of your lows along with a card that you can summon back with Prayer. Now that the little Q&A is all wrapped up, let's talk about the final thoughts. With this deck looming ever closer to release, we will see what the deck will do in the current phase of the meta. With Rescue Ace being slightly weakened, to Fire Kings being on the verge of the best deck and other decks popping up into the format, it'll be a hard struggle for players that are new to the deck. Voiceless Voice is going to be a strong deck since it can be played at a tier 2 level and can win games against the best of the best, as we've seen in other tournaments that people have hosted this month. I see a lot of success in the future for this deck, but only time will tell with this actual deck. Now, before I end this video, I would like to thank everyone for sticking around through the whole entire video, as this is one of the things that I really wanted to do the most. Voiceless Voice is one of my most anticipated decks that I really love to play, as it's a retrain of 3 of my favorite ritual monsters in the whole entire series of Yu-Gi-Oh!, being Skull Guardian, along with Saphira and Seravis. I've always loved these cards because of the nostalgia that they have for me, especially with Skull Guardian from Forbidden Memories, as I loved playing the game and having that in my deck whenever I could. But overall, I hope you guys did enjoy this longer form of video as a little breakdown and a starting intro for the Voiceless deck. But anyways, I hope you all did enjoy, and I will see you all in the next video.